Welcome to the Mentors Podcast. I'm your host, Emre Yilmaz, and today I'm speaking with Dave Darlington. Dave is a 3-time Grammy Award recipient, legendary mixing engineer, producer, and an amazing human being. If you're a music professional, there's an abundance of knowledge here. And if you're not, know that beyond the technicalities we discuss, there are profound insights here that can apply to life itself. We spoke about the influences and the mentors that shaped his path, the evolution of the recording industry, balancing the technical and artistic approach, the advantages of digital recording, the definition of success, his encounters with Sting, Ron Carter, and many other giants in music, his aviation passion, and how it translated to his engineering and much more. Dave's love for life and his craft is nothing short of extraordinary. It's such a privilege and honor to have Dave on this first recorded conversation for the Mentors Podcast. Now I bring you Dave Darlington.
Every time we do a session and every time we have a conversation, I learned so much from you. So I'm so excited to learn more about your incredible journey today and share it with the world.
Well, it's mutual, man. When we have sessions together, I get ideas from you too, and techniques and stuff from everybody that I work with. So, the trick is keep learning, right? Never stop learning.
I want to approach our conversation today with a little different perspective because all the biographical aspects about you, like your life story and all your amazing accomplishments, are covered in so many interviews out there.
Yeah.
People can see that. So today I want to get into the concepts actually that shaped your trajectory and molded your professional path and left a mark in your personal growth. With that in mind, I want to start with the mentorship, but not just the people who explicitly took on that role. It could be the heroes you looked up to back in the day, the artists and thinkers that ignited your thing, whether if you knew them personally or not.
So I was lucky enough to be in college when jazz and rock sort of fused together, and it was a really heady time in music. And I was surrounded by the people in my music school that I was attending, and also players outside of school that I'm friends with and still look up to a lot. And we discovered Miles Davis and Chick Corea and Weather Report and Mahavishnu, all in those years of 69 to 73, 4. And those were our heroes. And then the pop side was, Earth, Wind and Fire and Stevie Wonder, Joni Mitchell. So the music was just so emboldening and so enlightening. And so my little circle of friends, we always considered ourselves a little left of center. And so we started really worshiping those guys. Like, man, how can we learn how to play like those guys play? Now, in my later adulthood life, I've had a chance to work with a lot of those people that I really looked up to. Wayne Shorter, Ron Carter is a dear friend of mine. Herbie Hancock I worked with a little bit. I did some Miles records, post-mortem, of course, but I'm touching the tapes that Miles played on in the 70s and 80s. So I feel really, really lucky about that. But it's sort of like, even though it was a very wandering trajectory, it's still a kind of a dead-on path of like, this is the music I like. How do I learn how to be around it and be in it somehow? Bass, when I was younger, bass was the way. I was playing fusion with a lot of great, great players along the way. And then I started engineering and met all the New Yorkers and sort of, became established in New York. And now I'm just enjoying being friends with these amazing, amazing people. But, not only musicians are mentors for me, but other engineers and artists too, that have a certain way of looking at things and approaching things. There's 3 or 4 people that are in the industry that I consider, my go-to guys if I have a question or a problem, or even think of them as informing me on how I think. For example, the producer of Herbie's Gershwin's World and Wayne Shorter's Allegria is a kind of guy who will not settle for anything less than the absolute perfect best that you can possibly do. And he's always pushing you and saying, no, it's not, the sax sound is not quite right. Go move the mic an inch to the left. And, you're working and it's hard and you're sweating and oh man, this guy's driving me nuts. But you know what? He pushed me to betterness, to greatness. And I love him for that. And we're lifelong friends. We always talk about we'll write a book one day, of our book that of all the tenets that we hold, do push yourself to be your best, don't settle for mediocre, et cetera, et cetera. So there's 3 or 4 people like that in the record business that I've met along the way that I'm still very tight with. And if I don't hear from them in every couple of weeks, I call them or they call me, or let's have dinner, that kind of thing.
Those certain friendships and time put into things, it's invaluable.
It's also a really good balance too, because one of them is like that, I would tell you, like sort of a perfectionist, and the other one is kind of the opposite. He's been in the music business for many, many decades, and it's like if something breaks or it doesn't go well, he's like, so what? We'll put the record out. It'll be fine. So I have that yin and yang from 2 people that I really look up to in the business, and one guy keeps me from being too nervous, and one guy keeps me from being too lazy. So that's a really good balance, I think.
I remember you mentioning in sessions, perfection is enemy of the art.
Yes.
But I guess we also have to strive for perfection to create that masterwork in the end.
Yes, correct. And I see that in our work together, right? We, often we come back and we just touch up a little something and we go, there it is.
That's it.
I mean, part of my business cycle is, I do the heavy lifting with someone, like the guy that was here today, send him home with the stuff. And I bet in 2 or 3 days, I'll get a little email. And most of the time it's, Dave, it sounds great. There's just a couple things I hope we can fix. And of course we can. It's like polishing, right? And we polish within our normal resources. We don't go crazy and polish forever, because then you never put out anything. You don't have a body of work at that point. If you're always polishing and never releasing, you don't have any catalog.
A good song is a finished song. Yeah. Definitely.
Yes, that's right. Sting said, you don't finish an album, you abandon it. Right?
That's right.
And yet he came back and re-sang his entire album after it was sung once. He came back and sang it again. So we all have that dichotomy of like, when is enough and when is it too much? My thing is if I can play the record from top to bottom and not be distracted by, that triangle came in too loud, or, that background vocal sounds a little out of tune. If I can just listen to the whole record and not have one of those little demons pop up on my shoulder, then I think the mix is done. So that's sort of like, when is dinner ready? When I can listen from top to bottom and not be distracted by a technical point.
As much as you're able to disclose, were you able to see much of the difference from his first take of singing the full album and then going back to Italy or wherever he went back to and came back and did the whole album again?
Well, yes. It wasn't just a first take. I mean, it was many, many takes. And the truth lied somewhere in maybe the 2/3 mark. He did get better because, first of all, the album we were working on was a sort of Elizabethan era songs, and he wasn't familiar with them like he wrote them. He didn't write most of them. So he was kind of learning them and internalizing them. So he got to a point where they were internalized. And then it became just a little phrase and a little phrase, although he would try to do full takes and everything. So yeah, it was a lot of eye rolling. If he can get one phrase better and we include it on the album, then, it's worth the time. You have to weigh that against your resources. And with a guy like that, there's plenty of resources around. And at the end of the day, the record company, we had a playback in the studio where we mixed it for the record company and the management and him and his family. And, the one comment was, wow, we've never heard his voice sound like that.
Oh, yeah.
From the record company.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was good. We were focusing on his voice really more than anything else.
And I remember you saying once, he was also mostly concerned about his voice. He wasn't really...
Yes. Not so much about the bass or the hi-hats or anything like that. No, he was really all about the singing. I think particularly because these were different kinds of songs for him. They weren't pop and they weren't that sort of jazzy Dream of the Blue Turtle kind of thing. It was Elizabethan carols and Soul Cake and that kind of stuff from that period. So he was not as confident maybe as he would have been in a rock setting or a jazz setting.
He's one of my heroes. He's incredible.
Oh, he's amazing. He's amazing. He sang his heart out every single day. He's tireless. We're almost exactly the same age. he does physical training every morning.
Okay.
He eats properly. He buys new guitars and goes, he's still excited about a new guitar at this point in his career. You got to look up to that, right? The joy, he's like a childlike joy of music that we all felt since we were teenagers. He still has that.
It's amazing. So speaking of childlike, if you were to go back further and to child Dave, what caused you to go to music school? Did you have any musicians in the family? Did they support you? How was it?
My mother played a little piano, so we had a piano. And I remember we purchased a little baby grand piano when I was probably 6 or 7. And I started taking piano lessons. And, you play John Thompson book and, the typical suburban, everybody takes piano lessons kind of vibe. And I liked it okay. It wasn't the greatest thing. Then I finally had one teacher who brought the Dave Brubeck book over at one point. We had that album. So when did that come out? Take 5 or 6, 1960 or something. So I was probably 8 or 9 or 10. And do 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 dun dun do do. Oh, this is much cooler than Mozart, right? And just struggling, trying to I couldn't play it very well, but I could play it, and so that led to like being able to play the boogie woogie bass line on the left hand, which I probably played for hours on end and drove my parents nuts. He just like grooving away at 10 years old. So then I put that down for a little while, and we moved from New York to Florida. And that year that we moved, so I had all new friends, all new surroundings, an entirely new environment, and I was 12, and the Beatles came out. So that was a social and cultural phenomenon, but I still wasn't connected to guitars or anything that way until one of my friends, of all places, the middle school music class, hey, I'm Jimmy, hey, I'm Dave. Yeah, my parents gave me an electric guitar for my birthday. He had a Gibson Melody Maker, the one pickup, super cheap Gibson. I'm like, wait a minute, you actually have an electric guitar? Can I come over? So I went over and with, just like, wow, he was learning chords, so, okay, so I got to get one too. And his brother played a little drums, and he got a drum set for his birthday. So I mowed lawns and picked up soda bottles for the deposit money, and I found a guitar that was $50 in a used guitar store, and I bought it. I have a picture of me somewhere at 12 years old with my K hollow body guitar. And so we had a little band together. We formed a little band, and we played birthday parties and stuff like that. And I was completely hooked. And that's really what started. Now, when I went off to college, I thought, well, I'll have to give that up. That was just high school and a hobby. So I didn't go to college right away to go to music school. I thought I would be an architect. I went to the University of Florida, which has a very good architecture school, and I got into it. And my freshman year, I started going, I don't really like this architect stuff, but I'm still playing bass. I had my bass with me and my amplifier, and I was already in a band. I got in a band like within a week of being in college. So it was kind of a decision that was just made for me by it's just your DNA. It's not DNA, but whatever it is in your social makeup that you're led to where you're supposed to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
My son just graduated in film school, and he feels the same way. He played some violin when he was younger, and he was okay, but he didn't really dig it. But when he found the camera, he caught on fire, and he's like, I got to go to film school, and I'm going to be a cameraman, and blah, 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 blah. And now he's doing that, and I see exactly that same path of when you finally get that chemistry that's right for you, you just know it. You just know it. Almost all the people that I know, like you and the artists that come here, they have that same experience of like, I can't do anything else. I wouldn't know what else to do. I might do a day job or, pump some gas to feed myself, but what I am is a musician,
mm-hmm.
and I have to make music in some way or other, right? As a player, as an engineer, as a producer, as a songwriter, whatever it is, you have to make music. And then I sort of discovered the record business. All the time I was in bands playing bass, the idea was to get on a record. That was like, it wasn't about playing on a stage and being adored by 2,000 people. It was like, we got to get on a record somehow. In those early days of tape recorders where you could record something on the left side and then play the left side back to the right side and add yourself singing. So these same brothers that I was just telling you about, they had a Sony tape recorder that could do that. So we built up a little layer cake of our little songs, which I don't even remember what the songs were, and they were probably not great, but we had a ball. we just thought it was the best thing since popcorn.
Do you think those tapes are sitting somewhere?
I don't know. There's a lot of tapes from college that actually I got back in touch with the drummer. We used to record a lot of jam sessions in college, long extended jams, and he asked me for the tapes years ago. And then he just recently passed away. So I asked his wife if she knew of any reel-to-reel tapes around the house, and she said no. So I don't know. There's nothing of my music that's older than, say, 1978 or 79 when I first got to New York.
So to close up the childhood, so you never imagined yourself one day you would be doing records in your studio that would be world hits?
Not as a child. No, we just, being in a band was, it was just as much fun going to band practice as it was going to a gig. It wasn't always about just having a gig. It was the social, because if the guys in your band with you liked the same music, and, you would pool your money together to buy a microphone because, nobody had any money. We barely had guitars and amps. And so we need a microphone. Mm-hmm. I can remember doing gigs where the mic was coming out of the guitar amp on the other channel because, we didn't have a PA. And you learn about it. A lot of my mixing beginnings came from figuring out the PA. We need a better sound. How are we going to get a better sound? Well, let's get a split set of speakers with some low speakers and some high speakers. Okay. Now let's get a mixer. What's a mixer? We need a mixer and a power amp. Okay. And I'm learning, how to plug that stuff in and how the signal flows. And then, okay, now you need an echo for the singer. Okay, so let's buy a roll-in tape echo. And how do we get the singer to go through the echo, but, not everybody else? We can't just put it on everybody. And you just figure it out. It's, recording is the biggest DIY industry ever. If you go back and look at the history of recording, Les Paul and Robert Fine with the symphonic, the Mercury symphonic sound, and Tom Dowd pushing the desks back at night in Atlantic offices and making a recording studio out of the record company office, and Al Schmidt. It's just figure it out. Whatever you have around that's going to get the sound to be recorded somehow, it's do it yourself. He's like, whatever you got, plug it in, figure it out. So
speaking of the gear, the other day I was going through the interviews that you did.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Commodore 64, man.
Yeah.
That was of course, the use case was completely different. That was, when I was a kid, that was my game console. That thing was, I would only know how to load certain games with a cassette that would take half an hour to load.
Right.
And you were actually connecting a console and record with that thing?
Well, the Commodore 64 was sparked the kind of aha moment. The Commodore 64 was in the music store. Mm-hmm. There was a place called Rogue Music, and they would sell guitars and wah-wah pedals. And then one day there's a Commodore 64, which was the least expensive computer that you could buy. And I remember feeling like, man, I better figure out what's going on here. I'm going to be left in the dust, right? Because the computers are going to take over and I won't know what to do. So I had an Atari ST 1040, which is a little bit more expensive. And that's only because there was what was the name? What's B&H now? The big B&H mail order store. It used to be called 48th Street Photo or 46th Street Photo or something like that. It's the same guys in the same store. So that's where you went. And they sold me the Atari 1040 ST with a software called Steinberg 24, which was 24 tracks of MIDI, basically MIDI. And so you didn't connect a board to it. You connected your drum machines, and you had it had MIDI into the. An Atari 1040 actually had a MIDI port on the side of the box itself. So you didn't need a MIDI interface, but you connected your drum machine and your synthesizer, and then you recorded these parts, and the Atari would play back the drum part and the keyboard parts. And then I would record those sounds to my Fostex 8-track that I had, which was a quarter-inch 8-track with Dolby C noise reduction. So, you put the drums on track 1, you put the bass on track 2, you put the piano on 3 and the synth on 4, and now you have 4 more tracks for singers. And I had microphones from the band. We had SM57s and SM58s from having a band. So I set it up and, ran it into I had a little console for that and to play back the 8 tracks. The console was about getting in and into the 8-track tape and back out into your speakers and trying to balance things. And those early days of balancing were really a struggle. But I could balance a little bit from being the PA guy in the band. I used to walk out in front of the band on my long cable while we were playing and say, okay, this part sounds good, but this other thing doesn't sound so good. And why? Okay, maybe the vocal needs a little more treble, or maybe, you know, the kick drum is too loud, or whatever it might be. So I had a console with the band, and then I had a different console in my little spare bedroom.
It really amazes me that you seeing the evolution of technology from that MIDI setup on the Atari to Pro Tools setup you're using now.
Yeah, if you think about all those great records from the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, you're really trying to just get the music out. And the technology is the gateway. So wherever we are in the moment, like right now we're about to be in AI and ChatGPT songwriting.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, back in the 60s, the Beatles were on 4-track, and before that Elvis was on mono or 2-track. And they put the band around, and if somebody was too loud, they made him move back. And before that, in the 30s, everybody was singing into the horn, which was scratching the wax disc. And the singer was in the front, and the tuba was in the back. And, you know, my point is that the whole idea is to get this music recorded so that somebody who's not there at the moment can hear it somewhere else and at some other time. So you think about Beatles demos versus Beatles finals, right? And how those songs evolved, right? Now we can hear the demos now from Anthology and all that stuff. And then you hear the song that you're familiar with, and you hear how it evolved. Well, you're like, this is great. You know, they do it the same way everybody else does it. You know, they're just a little better at it, you know? So that's the goal, is to be better at taking that kernel of an idea and getting to a point where that piece of recorded music is exciting for other people somewhere else in the world. That's really the whole record industry in a nutshell.
Speaking of that industry, it must have been so challenging and full of triumphs for you. Could you reflect on some particularly demanding moments that tested your resilience?
Oh, sure. You know, everything is not super smooth all the time. You know, sometimes you do mixes and people aren't happy with them, particularly early in my mixing. You know, you don't hit a home run every time you're up, but I guess part of my personality is, you know, being dogged a little bit and learning from my mistakes. Like if I failed at a mix, I'm not say failed, but somebody was less than thrilled. Okay, why exactly? And I've told these stories in other podcasts, like the Phyllis Hyman record. I mixed it, and then when it came out, it seemed a little shinier somehow than my mix. And so I asked the producer later when I saw him, "What was that, my mix?" He said, "Yeah, it's basically your mix, but I had somebody come behind you and work on the vocal a little more." And when you can put the vocal in a record where it belongs, that's when you're going to be a mix engineer. So I took that to heart. I was hurt, but I was determined that, okay, so yeah, I'm gonna spend more time focusing on the vocal, which is the most important thing after all, and not so much about the kick drum, right? So that was a good lesson for me. It was a good kick in the butt of like, what's the most important thing about the record? The artist, right? If the artist is not shining, then nobody cares about the snare drum. Nobody ever bought a record because of the snare drum sound, except maybe Cameo Word Up. But other than that, I don't think so.
Correct. Other than your few music enthusiast friends and
yes,
other musicians nerding out on it.
Exactly right. So, you know, so you learn those lessons, like, you know, go early and be prepared, especially when like recording, when you're the recording engineer, that's probably the hardest job of all, because you have to direct all those interns and everything, and, you know, set up the drum mics and be ready, make sure they're all routed, and you're in a room, maybe you've never been there before, or a board that you kind of don't know very well. Boards all work the same way, but every brand of board has a different set of switches to do the same job, just like softwares, right? So let's say you've mixed a million things on Logic, and now you have to mix on Ableton. So you get it, you know what's going on, but now, okay, where is that again? You know, so that's how big analog consoles are too. SSL, Neve, API. They all do the same thing. They all have channels. They go to tape, they come back, the mics come in, they go to tape, and they come back on the monitors. But you have to kind of know your way around. So there's the stress of that. Then there's all the musicians. Right? I don't hear myself, and this is not the mic they used when I recorded blah, blah, blah. And, you know, okay, man, well, what's your favorite mic, and is everything comfortable? You got to go around and make friends with everybody. And when you're a beginner, you don't kind of know everybody. Now, if I did a big band, I would probably know everybody in the set. But when you're kind of in the middle, the journeyman stage of a career, You may not know all the trombone players, and then one guy might be grouchy and give you some shade, and then you can't let that shade distract you from your job, which is to get the record to tape the way that the person who's instigating the whole thing is imagining it, right? So, but my point of that little paragraph was that it's very stressful being the recording engineer on a large recording date. So it's much less stressful to sit in the mix, because especially when you have plenty of time, and if something goes south, you can figure out what happened and go back and fix it. In a recording date, when the people are getting paid by the hour and there's lots of high-end people, and the rhythm section's got to be done because the strings are coming at 2:00, it's like a lot of pressure.
A lot of moving parts.
And you're depending on other people to help you. And so there's some studios in town where the staff is really great, and you could always count on them to be great. Sear Sound and what's now Power Station, what used to be Avatar. That's the high end hit factory. If a mic was making a noise, before I even pointed it out, the assistant would be running out with a replacement. That's the kind of staff you really want to have on your side in those environments. But I remember thinking when I was a tracking engineer, before I was a mix engineer, why would you want to mix? It's so much fun to set up the mics and track. And then I became more of a mix engineer. And, why would you just want to be a mastering engineer? You never see anybody and you're just mastering at the end of the process. And now I have mastered quite a bit. And I understand the joys and the trials of all of those jobs, right? There's different rewards and different pitfalls in all those jobs. The mastering engineer, like if you send it off to the label and they press a test pressing and there's a scratch in your digital file that you didn't catch, they have to pay for another pressing. That's like, harakiri, you're like, oh my God, I cost the label $1,000. They don't try to get the money from you, but your reputation suffers. So, there has to be a certain quality control on your side before you send things out, especially nowadays in the digital world. You can't just hit send. You have to listen to it down in a quiet environment with no distractions and go, okay, everything went as it should. Now I can send it off, especially to a high-end label like Universal or Sony. They're not playing.
You just mentioned mastering. I was talking to a buddy of mine yesterday. He wanted me to ask you this. How would you explain what mastering does to someone that has no idea about music? They just turn on the radio and listen to music.
Right.
What would be the easiest explanation?
So, mastering is the last stage between the artist and the consumer. So what you're doing is you're taking these songs and preparing them to be broadcast or streamed or downloaded, whatever it may be, in the best possible presentation. It's kind of like the last makeup dust before the camera rolls on the actors, right? How there's always a person that comes out and with the blush and fluffs the hair and everything. So especially when you have a collection of songs on an album or an EP that come from different places, you don't want one to be really loud and bassy and the next one to be trebly and soft, right? They all have to flow from one to another. You don't want the consumer to have to turn up their earpod or turn down their earpod from song to song. So yeah, it's the last quality control portal. So now if the mixes are good from the mix engineer, you shouldn't do too much. All you should do is balance out the levels, right? If they're not good, then you have tools to fix it, right? The mastering suites that we know about, and multiband compression, and of course EQ, dynamic EQ, that only EQs things when there's too much of it, right? If there's too much energy at a certain point, you can dip down that energy, but only when it's there. So let's say that a certain time the guitar plays and it's boomy at 300, but most of the time it's a female singer. She's not going to be too boomy at 300. So you put a dynamic EQ that only reacts when it feels that 300 getting too lively. We have incredible tools now. You didn't have those tools in analog days. Having one or a stereo channel of multiband compression was a major coup for a mastering studio. Now it's taken for granted. I mean, there's analog versions of that in the really, in Sterling Sound and.
And a lot of folks still choose to go to Sterling for the analog hardware.
Many. Sterling is like McDonald's, billions and billions sold.
Uh-huh.
If you counted up every record that's been through Sterling, and that's a testament to their business model and also their talent. It was started by amazingly talented guys, some of whom are not with us anymore, but they were the wizards of the analog days when we engineers kind of really didn't know what they were doing. It was like the voodoo, and you would just go there and sit in the back and let them clean up your stuff. And wow, it's starting to sound really a lot better. What are they doing? I don't even want to know. That now I do know, but that's after years and years. It's like anything. How is John Coltrane playing those scales? Well, if I practice saxophone for 12 years, I might know, right? So if you mix for 30, 40 years and master for 20 years, and some of your masters are considered great, and some masters are, maybe we'll get somebody else. Nobody, even Bob Ludwig, doesn't always hit it out of the park.
How do you foresee the future of model, that Sterling sound, where there's the analog is still being used?
Well, no, it's not always analog at Sterling, but it can be. One of my favorite mastering engineers is Mark Wilder, and he has in his studio he's at Battery, which is part of Sony, and he's got all the different kinds of tape machines that you can just bring your Pro Tools session and run it through a tape machine if you feel like that would really help, and he does sometimes. But he also works in the box in Sequoia, which is plugins and stuff like that. He runs the stuff through a desk, so there's tubes and analog EQs and stuff like that, and then a lot of his post production stuff is in the box with plugins.
And in your mastering process, it's mainly in the box, as you say.
Yeah, I've been mixing in the box since the mid 2000s when Pro Tools really became the thing. Because I had a big analog desk, and the lease ran out on that studio in 2000. So the question was, should I bring the desk over to where I am now, and it would fill up the entire room, and you would never even be able to walk into the vocal booth because you'd have to suck in your gut to pass the side of the board. And I decided not to, and it was kind of one of the smartest things I ever did. First of all, you have to repair those things all the time. They run hot because there's a lot of electronics, and there's a whole component of a console that sits in a different room called the machine room, which is kind of the brain and the power supply and the computer and everything. And then the channels get fuzzy and break, or one of the switches breaks, or the light burns out. It's very, very high maintenance. So I didn't do it, and I sold the desk, and I'm not sad. I have analog stuff here. When I record through channels, channels from a desk, Neve channels and API channels. But my console is really Pro Tools. And there's been reports lately of a lot of the guys a little older than me who are hardcore, I got to have my racks. I'll never give up my racks. Well, they've all given up their racks now. And they go, oh, man, it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier, isn't it? If you want to come back to a mix from last week, you don't have to plug everything in again. You just open the session. That's actually helpful to the business model because you can offer people revisions for not so much money and not so much time and not so much stress. Hey, what would it be like if we muted the background vocals in the bridge? Well, that's going to take me a half hour. So if you can afford a half hour of my time, I'm happy to show you the bridge without the background vocals. And then, it's not going to break the bank, and you're going to know whether you like it or not. And we still have the old one, right? That's in the can, and we'll try the new one, and you tell me which one you like, and we'll put it in the master. So it's kind of really, really great that we don't have this like, oh man, I got to decide right now if the background vocals are going to be in the bridge, yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. What do I do? No.
Otherwise, it's going to break the bank. Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to break the bank. Back in the analog days, it actually would break the bank because you're on tape. You have to book the studio that has the same equipment. You have to book the exact same studio because all the outboard gear and everything has to be the same. Then you have to get the notes and plug in the limiters and plug in the EQs and everything and recall the board. That was kind of electronic. It would do that pretty fast. And then listen to the mix on a DAT tape or something and play the new mix that's rolling off the tape now and A/B that. Okay, it sounds almost the same, but the snare is a little different. Oh, that's because I didn't have that button pushed in right there. But does that happen in DAWs? No. When you open those plugins, there's not one button that's different. It's electronic. It's like a word processor. It's not a period didn't turn into a comma or a semicolon because you closed it and reopened it. But in analog, that stuff happened all over the place, and it took hours, literally a couple, 3 hours to solve all those gremlins to just get back to where you were. So you've already rented an engineer and a recording studio for 3 hours before you've done any work. Now you raise your hi-hat. You want your hi-hat up 1 dB. Okay, great. How's that? Is it good? Yeah, I think it's good. Okay. Now let's print the main mix, the instrumental, the vocal up a dB, the TV, the performance track. And don't forget the stems. I need a drum appella and a key appella. Now you've paid studio 6 hours. You've paid the engineer for 6 hours, and you probably ordered food to put the hi-hat up 1 dB. I don't even charge for that because I do it in the morning while I'm having coffee. Hey, can you put the guitar a little louder during the bridge? Yeah, no problem. I don't like billing people for stuff like that because it's not the nuts and bolts of what we do. It's a little, like, come here, you got some lipstick on you, let me get that off. That's what that is, right? Those kind of little, we've done that on our records, right? We've, polished things up. There was a little speck. Now that the window is perfectly clean, we see a little speck that we didn't see before. And I couldn't see it before because the window wasn't clean. And now you've made it crystal clear. Thank you for that. But can we get that speck? Of course we can get that speck because it's not so heavy on our resources. It doesn't cost me a ton of time. It doesn't cost you a ton of money. So let's do it.
Well, plus it's your big heart. I'm still blown away that how I get to work with someone like you.
I like being in the band with you, man. We have a ball. And that's how I feel about the people that I interact with. I'm still at heart a band member, even though I don't play out anymore. But, my happiest times are hanging with my buds going, let's figure out how to play Chameleon. That's a cool song, So now I'm hanging with my buds and we're working on stuff that they wrote and stuff that they spent a lot of money to record. And that's really important to them. So it becomes important to me. That's more like running with your pack, running with your dogs.
That's so beautiful. So what strategies and techniques did you employ over these decades-long career to stay motivated in this ever-evolving music industry? How did you keep your motivation?
I was always one of the guys that was into the new stuff. So when drum machines first came out, I bought an Oberheim DX, which was a mid-priced. There was a bigger one called a DMX, I think, DMX. And the DX was the baby brother, so I could afford it. And it had a clap. And you could plug a switch, any kind of switch that made it connect. You plugged it into a 1/4 inch and you could trigger whatever sound you decided of the 8. You could trigger a kick drum So in my band, I got a little doorbell foot switch and I put it underneath my feet. And when it was time to have claps on a disco song, suddenly my band had claps, like Chic. And the drummer was really mad. Get that thing out of here, because he thought he had that idea of like, it's going to put me out of business. And I'm the opposite. This is going to get more business. So think about the internet. So now everybody can hire an engineer you could hire an engineer in Australia if you had a good one that you liked. So here I am in New York. I've got a clientele in New York. Occasionally I get flown somewhere. Like I used to work a lot in Japan, some London. And now they don't need me to fly me anywhere because we have the internet. But guess what? That opens up my market to the entire world. So you just make a decent website and you make it easy for people to find you on the website. Contact me here. I'll get back to you. And you make your prices reasonable so people go, hey, man, I love this other record you did 15 years ago. How much does it cost to mix? And how far away do I have to wait? And so I answer all those emails. I have a policy of 0 inbox in my email. I don't let people wait more than 24 hours to hear back. Sometimes I can't always answer all their questions, but I don't want them hanging, going, I sent an email to that guy, he never answered me. I don't like that. So, thanks for contacting me. Here's how it usually works. We can probably, I don't want to schedule your mix until I have the files because I can get burned that way, right? If I put your mix on Thursday and you call me on Wednesday, oh man, the singer got sick. Now my Thursday is toast. So I learned that pretty quick. I don't book the date until I have the materials, but then I don't make them wait months. Okay, here's your date on the 29th, boop, boop, boop. And this is what's going to happen. I'll do my version. I'll send it to you. It costs X. You live with it. You play it in the car. You play it in your bedroom. You play it on speakers. You play it for your mom. You make your notes. When you're ready with your notes, we'll do another session that calls Y. By that time, you'll have a master that's ready to go out on Blue Note. Boom, simple. And if it's good music, it might just do that. And if it's not good music, then I can't do anything about that. But I'll make it sound as good as it can sound. But I'm happy to work with you at whatever level you are, as long as you are somewhat professional in approaching me. You know, of course, not everybody that sends me an email is at a top-notch professional level, but you know, you have to be a little kind, right, in the world, and don't be snooty of like, oh, well, you don't know what you're doing because you're just a kid and you're just starting out. So I always try to think of that, how people, you know, the people that treated me kindly are the ones I look back on fondly. The engineers that would take a minute and show me something that maybe they were doing that I was confused about, you know, the people that were kind. And then there were engineers when I was young that would throw a blanket over the desk at night so that I couldn't see their EQs or anything. How are you getting that snare sound? Well, you're never going to know because I'm going to cover it up at night. It's true. That's absolutely true. But the ones that would share with me, some of them are still my good friends, and others I look back on fondly of like, man, that guy was so nice to tell me these things that I should know, you know, and I don't have to just learn them by falling on my face 10 times. He was kind enough to show me. You don't need all this gear to make a good rough mix, was one guy. You have one reverb, have one delay, and make a mix that sounds like it could be on the radio. You can do it in 10 minutes. You really can. Now, it might not be the final record, and it might not be the best mix you ever did in your life, but it should be serviceable and make people excited and want to, you know, play the guitar solo or whatever it is that you're setting up the mix to do. You shouldn't have to take an hour and make everybody wait to get a good rough mix. Now, of course, we don't really have that problem because we open up the file and it's just where we left it. But in analog, you put the tape on, it's, you know, the faders came up and you put the strip with the names, kick, snare, hi-hat, piano, vocal, and then you had to balance everything quickly so that we could get to work. It was a really good lesson. And I'm going to plug in this and I'm going to plug in that and we'll compress this. And the older engineer was like, no, you don't have to do that. Just get a good balance, you know, and people will dig it. It'll be fine.
So one day you record Ron Carter, then the next day you do a hip hop album, and then the next day you do a dance thing.
Sometimes, yeah.
Your heart is on jazz, as far as I hear.
In terms of music that I like to enjoy on my own time, yeah, I've listened to more jazz than I listen to hip hop. I try to listen to everything to be a little bit on current. You know, so when somebody says, you know, can you do that thing that Post Malone does? I don't go, huh? Who's Post Malone? Yeah. You know, I'm old. But, you know, I try to stay current. But I like jazz a lot, of course, and especially those years of, like we talked about, the Chick Corea and Miles. But I also like classic rock and how do they get those tones? How were they getting those tones in the 60s and 70s? And that echo in the 60s and 70s that was so great. I really like that stuff. But yeah, I would say I guess more than 50% of what I do is jazz. But the thing is, I don't have to do just jazz every day, and I'm not just a jazz engineer, so I'm not kind of pigeonholed like that, which is lucky for me business wise.
Sure.
You know, so I don't have to wait. I don't have to wait for the next guy to make a jazz record. I do a lot of singer-songwriter stuff. You know, people who just want to sing and they have a certain, whether it's American Songbook, you know, that kind of, you know, Diana Krall kind of jazz, which is more song oriented as opposed to blowing. And but also, you know, folky kind of singer-songwriters too. I do sometimes, which I like if it's really good, especially if people, you know, making music from the heart. You know, there's that shared community of enjoying a good song.
2000s back then, when I used to go to clubs, song was Bob Sinclair, World Hold On.
Yeah, we did that here. That was written here, actually.
Wow.
As a matter of fact. So I was engineering while they figured out what they were going to do. Bob had some tracks out of his computer, so we imported those, and then we added some stuff here, and then they sat in there and wrote the song together.
That too.
Yep. Bob Sinclair and I had a good run there for a minute. There was the World Cup soccer song from that year was his Love Generation. He was writing with people here in New York, and I was his guy. I had a good run there in the late mid '90s to the mid 2000s of the really high end DJs. All their hits, I got to be around where they're working on. I'm starting in the '90s with the CNC Music Factory, and then Masters at Work had New Eurekan Soul with George Benson and Lisa Fisher, and they had a lot of really amazing artists, Jody Watley, and then Roger S. and Bob Sinclair, Harry Romero, a lot of Eric Murillo. I Like to Move It. A lot of big time guys happened to be around and just in New York, and I was one of many. I wasn't the only guy doing that stuff. There's a whole bunch of engineers that made a good living in that time working with all those guys. But I was lucky enough to have my own place. That's another thing of having a facility is a big help to business, as opposed to somebody says, "Yeah, I can do your record. Like, go rent the studio and then rent me, and I'll see you on Tuesday." No, you just have one fee. You come to my place, and I take care of the electricity and the insurance and the rent. You don't have to think about it. And everybody who comes here, they kind of know what they're going to get. I don't have a big grand piano or anything like that, because I don't really care to record that kind of stuff that, maintain a beautiful Steinway piano so somebody can go, "I don't know if I like this piano." It doesn't seem like a good use of my money and resources, but I have good speakers. The music sounds good when we play it here. And I have really good microphones, so you can do an overdub, and I can set it up in a hurry. The vocal mic is always set up. So if somebody says, "I got an idea for some background," okay, boom, let's go. It's ready. You're on. And if they want to do a guitar or a bass, I have good guitar amps. I have good bass amps, or we go direct, or we can do an acoustic. We can do horns. We can do choirs. We can do strings.
And it's your setup.
And it's me. It's kind of like my, my man cave, my clubhouse, my treehouse, So they know there's a certain vibe here. That's whatever my vibe is. It's here with me. We're not strict, and we're not wearing white coats, but we're not a bunch of hippies smoking weed either. We get work done, but we're relaxed and we're fun. We're jovial. I have nothing against either white coats or weed. and I have lots of friends who do both. Lots of uptight people with pocket protectors who I love dearly, and lots of people who enjoy life at whatever they do. But here it's relaxed, but it's a work ethic. They know they're not going to waste time. People are not going to go, "Well, I went to Dave's, we booked for 8 hours, but we only really worked for 4. No, we work, if it's an 8-hour session, we work for 8 hours. And whenever you feel the room when people get started to flag, you say, "Maybe should we take a walk and go get coffee and just let our ears, and you go out and you come right back, and then, okay, where were we?" And you knuckle down. So people like that. They like that. They know they're going to get good value for their money. They know my vibe, and if they're compatible with my vibe, which of course not everyone is, but if they are. And it's an artist vibe of like, what do you want to do? What are you hearing? Let's try to figure out what's in your head, and we'll get it out somehow.
Yeah.
And then, okay, you recorded somewhere else, and then you send it to your trombone friend who played an overdub. Let's see what you got. And then you put that mix up quickly, that rough mix paragraph we just talked about. And then I have my stuff that I know how to do, like really how to get the bass sitting there quickly, how to get the drums smacking quickly, how to get the vocal sounding lush. Mm-hmm. Within 15 or 20 minutes, they're going, "Oh man, I had this happen yesterday." This composer girl, arranger, kind of big bandy stuff. She's like, "I got a lot of stuff. It's all disorganized and it's not all sitting right." And I'm like, "Okay, boom, boom, boom." We have bass clarinets and alto saxes, things that are in the same world, and they're not separated, so we pan them around, and we have brass, and we have woodwinds and vocals and everything. Within a few minutes, it's starting to sound like kind of big band music, like, wow, okay, here's the Hollywood Bowl, wow. And she starts going, "Man, my stuff is sounding good," and now she's excited, because, they see it, oh, it's actually going to be a real record. People don't know, that's what a mixer does, right? A mixer makes it come from a demo or an idea to a real record, what people consider a record, whether it's in a movie or whether it's on Spotify or if it's on a jukebox, wherever it is, when you put it on, yeah, that's a record, whatever kind of music it is, right? So it's hard to make that leap from demo to record if you're not a mixer and you don't understand what these transformations are. Then it's not magic or anything. It's just stuff that you do. It's like, how does a jet pilot fly a jet? For him, it's like, I know how to fly the jet. I'll just do it. We'll just take off. So I know how to mix a record. We'll just do it. And then suddenly your demo or your kind of cloudy thing that you weren't sure if all the parts were going to work, now it starts to sound astute and, finalized. And that energy is, I thrive on. I mean, that's what I thrive on.
That's my favorite time, man.
We've had it together. Well, what happens is the people go quiet. I can feel it coming because, they're like, okay, so, I couldn't get a good trombone sound and, he had to do it over. And they're like kind of making excuses, right? And I'm working and listening and soloing and then then the producer or the artist gets a little quiet for a little while. And then I keep working, and then they see me start to ride the vocals so that there's nothing that we don't hear and there's nothing that makes us go, oh, that's too loud. So I'm kind of sanding the vocal down, right? And then they go, man, it's sounding better than I thought it was going to sound. And then that's when the party starts. That's when we really are like, man, we're having fun, aren't we? Yeah, we're going to have a great day today. And you're going to go home happy. And I am too.
Just to get there as quick as possible, I spend the extra mile to bring the session just as it should be in your thing. So you don't have to do any of those things that you would normally do, cleaning certain things up. And I'm like, I want to make sure I get there as quick as possible and sustain that beautiful moment as long as we can.
Yeah. What happens is you only have so much time and so much energy. So if you have to spend a lot of time editing and cleaning and labeling and figuring out, oh, what is this thing called audio? Oh, that's a tambourine. Okay, now I have to type tambourine.
Mm-hmm.
If that all comes to me already done, and some people even do color coding and stuff, they learn how I like to color code. Drums are blue, bass is purple. Then we're just doing music. We already know the song. And we can see the other good thing about digital that we didn't touch on is the visual feedback. It has good points and bad points because people tend to lean into the screen like, what did you just do there? Well, it doesn't matter because the person who's going to listen to this is not going to have my screen. So back up and close your eyes and listen and see if you like what I did, right? But the other thing is, for me, I'm getting feedback. Like I can get feedback about EQ from an analyzer. I can get feedback about compression from the meter when it tells me about compression. And analog consoles don't have those kind of meters until very late in the game. They started to have them.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can just look at the screen and get all kinds of information. You can see instead of a big board where, how are the strings panned? Wait a minute, I got to go down to the left and, oh, they're panned a little bit to the right. No, it's all in my television, like right in front of me between my speakers. So I look at the strings and there they are and they're panned and I know where they're panned. And you can see the loud moments coming up. So you could see the drummer's about to get really loud. I can draw that automation in before it even plays so that my audience, which is my clients, go, yeah, well, I used to think on my rough mix, the drums are really loud there, but somehow you got it sounding good. I'm like, yeah, I saw that one coming. I signaled and I turned. So there's a lot of good information that's coming from the visual thing, but you can't mix with your eyes, right? The information is just part of the tool kit, same way that the Commodore 64 was one of the tools back then.
I hear the discussion a lot about, I don't know about the AI generated song is one thing, but some people are upset about these LLMs, language models like ChatGPT's abilities. They're like, it will get, it's what about people? People do that. Well, I see it like a calculator. If you don't know how to ask the calculator, what is 5 plus 3? Throw it out of the window. It has no meaning.
It has no meaning, yeah.
Same thing with the language model like ChatGPT. Obviously, no one is suggesting to plagiarize your way out of everything and have that thing write it for you. It's not going to get you far.
Right.
But as a tool, to be used as a tool, I don't see anything wrong with it. I think it's incredibly helpful.
Well, you're going back to the thing we were just talking about of like, is the drum machine going to take gigs away or is the drum machine going to give us more gigs? So, what kind of person are you? And so whenever I would go to Starbucks, I would make sure I had the proper change because when you give a millennial a $20 bill for a coffee that costs $7.02, you see the look of panic. You see the panic on their face, right? So you go, man, they didn't learn arithmetic. They don't know anything about, you know what? They pay for everything with their phone. And they're always going to pay for everything with their phone. And the fact that you want them to give you $18.98 is you being an old guy.
Mhm.
That's you going, what about currency? Guys don't know the meaning of currency. No, you know what? We have a phone. Boom, paid for it. I'm gone. I was so like, okay, so which guy are you? Are you the get off my lawn old guy that says, no, you got to give me change for $20? Or are you going to go, you know what? I'll get the app too and save you guys the trouble because you're busy and you're young and you're doing your life. Why am I going to berate you for not knowing how to make change? They might not ever have to make change, right? Credit cards were once a brand new thing. I remember my parents going, there's this thing called American Express and you can buy stuff and not pay for it. Like, really? What the heck is that about? My parents were flabbergasted. And now we're like, everybody has to have a credit card.
Mhm.
So, that it's very much to that point of GPT. Okay, we don't want it plagiarizing, but, let's see what's going to happen. Right? Now we can, if Paul McCartney wanted to research a song that he heard about from Leadbelly, he would have to go somewhere and either buy the record or go to the library.
Sure.
And see if they had it so he could borrow it and play it in the library. We just go on Google and Leadbelly, boom. So there's all that. I mean, talk about plagiarizing. We have everything ever written and everything ever recorded pretty much at our fingertips.
Mhm.
Everything of Shakespeare's, every Agatha Christie novel, it's right there. You might have to pay a little money to access it, but it's not hiding from you. Right? All the great classics, Dostoevsky, so you don't have to go to the library. You can, if you like that vibe and you want to sit in your chair in the sun and read Dostoevsky, great, but you can also get it on your phone in 15 seconds. I think it's pretty cool. That whole wealth of knowledge of mankind, of all the different cultures and everything and all that knowledge and everything. So that's why when the ChatGPT makes a statement about something or a contract or a song or a novel, they're not plagiarizing. They're doing what Paul McCartney does, and he's dipping from Leadbelly and this one and that one, right?
Absolutely.
So we'll see where it goes, but I don't think you should be afraid of it. When the pandemic came, my son was in sophomore in college, and he's like, oh, Mike, I was supposed to be holding the camera, but now I'm on Zoom and everything. And I remember having a discussion with him about, I was alive in the gas crisis in the 70s when suddenly the Arabs were not giving us oil and nobody had gas. So you had to have your license plate number determined which day you could buy gas. If it was odd, it was Monday, Wednesday, Friday. If it was even, it was Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Nobody could buy gas on Sunday. And we thought the world was going to end. I mean, we're running out of gas. What are we going to do? And it, in about a season or two, it passed and life went on. Then there's the .com crash and the world is coming to an end. Then there was the Twin Towers and the world is coming to an end. And then there was the real estate boom in 2000, the real estate crash in 2008. The world's coming to an end. Then there was pandemic. The world's coming to an end. You know what? We're still here. Today was a hurricane in Florida. Some people are mopping out their basements right now and they're not happy. We're still here. And I feel the same way about the climate crisis. Like, it's going to get bad. It's going to get bad, but somehow human beings are going to figure it out. Even if the population gets decimated to the point where the pendulum slips the other way because we're not making so much of a mess, it's not going to be fun. It's going to be painful, but I still feel like there's going to be solutions. I don't know. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but I don't think so.
Well, you have to be, really. I feel like when we choose to work together instead of fighting with each other, we get to make space stations and iPhones.
Yes, absolutely.
Hopefully, if you don't blow each other up during this time, the technology is advancing in such scale that hopefully we'll find certain solutions when shit hits the fan.
Yeah. There's a whole train of thought of the philosopher, historian types that go, if you think about it, really, even though everything seems like it's falling apart, the way we live now, even compared to 100 years ago,
oh my God,
is crazy.
Yeah. Absolutely,
much less disease and much longer lifestyle and much more food for everybody. And Americans, everybody has 2 cars and 4 bedrooms and and a studio in their house. And we're complaining all the time. I mean, you know what? We live such a rich life. My family members and I talk about this a lot of like, well, we're really lucky. You know, we live in a suburban area that's gorgeous, but we can be in Times Square in 30 minutes. You know, so we have both. You know, we have the hustle and bustle and that supercharged energy, and then we have the pastoral, relaxing, all in the same day. You know, we don't have to fly anywhere. We don't have to travel anywhere to relax. We relax where we live. And, you know, we have plenty to eat. We're warm. We have clothes. You know, we're comfortable. It's pretty good.
For sure. Not everyone is as fortunate around the world, but as you said earlier.
Around the world, for sure not. But in the U.S., of course, there's poverty and there's hunger. Yes, I'm not dumb like that. But I'm just saying, thankful for where we are, you know, to live near to this great metropolis. You know, if you want to go to the symphony, you can go to the symphony. If you want to go to the Blue Note or the Vanguard, you can go to the Blue Note or the Vanguard. It's great.
I was actually saying that to support what you earlier said. Progress doesn't make it to the news.
Yeah.
Only the bad stuff make it to the news. Even globally speaking, there are much less people dying out of hunger today. Actually, there are more people dying out of obesity than hunger in the world right now.
Yes.
Insanely.
I would say that's right.
So yeah, I'm an optimist too, man. You always are an optimist. And that's the best vibe.
Absolutely.
Clearly, your career garnered so much success with all the songs that you may hear yourself, your mixes around the world on the radio when you're in a car, to Grammy Awards and everything. But once we receive them, the feeling changes. So how do you define success?
Part of it is that feeling we were talking about a minute ago, where people are leaving here generally happy. So let's say I have 10 clients in a week and 9 of them are happy. The one that's unhappy is the one that keeps me awake at night, because I don't get so much dopamine from the 9 that are happy. That's kind of the normal.
Yeah.
It's the one that's unhappy, like, okay, what did I do? What could I have done better? Or was it just one of those things that was not meant to be? Whatever. You know what I'm saying? That little pebble in your shoe, it's a tiny little pebble, but it drives you crazy. But I think success is just continuing on. You know, I'm well past what normal people would say is retirement age, but I have no intention of. I had a great day today. I had a ball today when we're having a ball right now. So I have no intention of stopping. Why should I? You know, unless somehow physically I become unable to continue. But as far as, I'm not tired in that way that, like, if I had driven a cab for 50 years or, you know, was a policeman for 25 years, you know, something like that would actually makes you tired because you're dealing with such stress all the time. Today wasn't stressful in the least. We had a great day. You know, I'm proud of the awards and everything, and I'm also proud of having touched those people that I looked up to, that where we started this conversation of, you know, knowing Ron Carter and having met Wayne. I saw Wayne Shorter has a movie out. Mm-hmm. There's a documentary about Wayne Shorter that just came out last Friday on Amazon called Zero Gravity.
Well, gotta watch it.
In honor of his passing last year. And one of the songs I mixed came on. You know, they went through his life and they played the Miles period, and then his Milton Nascimento album, Native Dancer, and and then the script came across I said, I know this song. What song is this? And it said, She Moves Through the Fair, which is from the Allegria album. So I'm hearing my mix on Amazon Prime. Now, nobody knows it's me except me. And the producer probably doesn't even ever going to watch the movie. And Wayne is gone. So nobody involved in actually making the record even cares or would put 2 and 2 together. But I know it's me. And it sounded every bit as good as all the Miles records and all the ones that came after that record. That was from 2003. And it was only 15 seconds or something, but it showed him playing it. And it said, you know, She Moves Through the Fair. Like, yeah, I did that. That was pretty good. I was grinning pretty good for that. And, you know, the Miles box sets, there's been some high watermarks in terms of the music that I love. To have handled those Miles Davis tapes from way back in the day and you know, heard Miles playing that nobody had heard before, and then having to mix it, and then having the record company go, yes, it's presentable now we can put it out, and the people will dig it. It's cool. It's really, really, really lucky. Sometimes records that you don't think are going to be so important end up being, you know, people like them after a long period of time, and they go, oh, you did that? Oh my God, I love that record. You know, that comes around to me often.
Yeah.
You know, record that might not have been a big commercial hit, but ended up being well liked in that genre, in the subculture of that genre.
Well, you certainly make the artist so happy leaving your space. Speaking of that space, got to come back. We have been doing COVID stuff. I can't wait to be there.
Yeah, we got to do it in person again. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
I'm cooking.
Good. I can't wait.
Speaking of your energy, you just mentioned, do you have any, you work out? Do you care about your diet?
Well, I do take care of my diet as within reason. I don't cut out everything, and but I don't eat cheeseburgers every day either. But I don't mind eating a cheeseburger once in a while. But not everything in moderation.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I walk the neighborhood in the morning before we go to work, and it's kind of our time to visit. And it's peaceful and quiet, and the sun is coming up, and the birds are waking up, and where we live has a lot of green space that the town is not going to ever build. It's not necessarily a park, but it's just land that's not going to be developed. So we walk around, and we call it our Central Park. So yeah, let's go take a walk in our Central Park. So that we do that every morning, and that's kind of like gets my day off on the right foot. After that's when I answer the emails and all that, and get ready for the workday. But I don't have a big regimen of yoga or workout. I've been through periods of doing that where I was working out religiously and doing yoga and stuff like that. And life just changes. Things loom and then they wane, and then other things loom and then they wane. But as long as you're physically doing okay, it doesn't matter really what age you are, right? In some ways, I'm feeling more healthy now than I felt in my 40s or 50s. So, you go to get your checkup and the numbers are good. You're like, man, I feel great. Let's go. It's funny how that works psychologically, right?
But I can imagine also Japanese cuisine being all refined is.
Yes, my wife cooks Japanese. She's fearless when it comes to food. She'll try anything. But, the Japanese morning diet is very healthy, right? Fish and rice and miso. That's a really good way to start your day, to break your fast.
So do you guys first go out to the walk, you do your rise the sun, and then come break the fast? And
Yeah, pretty much. Well, she eats like really traditional Japanese natto and all that kind of stuff. I pick at different things.
Nice.
But we're compatible that way. We don't always have to do exactly the same things.
You mentioned the jet pilot earlier. I know your aviation passion as well. You used to be a pilot, right? You used to fly planes.
Yeah, I still have my pilot's license, but I was flying instrument rated, and when my son got to be about 3 or 4, I started to feel like it was a little selfish of me to have a risky kind of hobby. Not that flying is really risky, but things can happen, and it was really just for my own fun and enjoyment. So I really stopped flying then. But if I would go take a few lessons, you have to be what's called current. You have to have X amount of takeoffs and landings within a certain period of time, and you have to have a flight instructor sign off on your book. I could go right back up. It's not hard. When you learn how to fly, you're a much more relaxed airline flyer.
Yeah.
Because you know what's going on in the cockpit way more than the average person who's kind of clueless.
Sure.
For example, every kind of plane has a perfect speed where they reach that speed and then you pull back and take off, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for a Cessna, which is what I flew, the little putt-putts, it's 55 knots, right? So there's nothing to do while you're running down the runway except go straight until you get to 55. There's absolutely nothing to do. You're just building up momentum. So when you're in that giant jumbo jet at Kennedy and he's rolling and he's rolling and he's rolling and I see the passengers like white knuckle, when are we going to take off? He's just chilling. He's just driving down the white line and he's watching that needle. When that needle hits whatever it is for an Airbus, 180 knots or 160 knots, then he pulls it back and up you go. So there's no reason to have the white knuckles if you understand what's going on. So I love that about learning how to fly. I learned so much about aerodynamics and how the instruments work, and how to you can fly a plane when it's really 3/4 broken if you know what you're doing. If you know you practice. Oh, your instruments just died, or oh, your engine shut off. Your instructor you'll be flying along working on something, your turns or whatever, and he'll reach over and shut the engine off. Because you never know when if that might happen, right? If you strike a bird or something, He said, okay, you just lost your engine. What are you going to do? And you have to, now we're working on emergency procedures. A minute ago, we were working on left turns. And so they teach you that. They teach you to be like quick on the draw and just like roll with it. As soon as you lose your engine, you got to, okay, you've set, there's a certain tilt where whatever altitude you have to keep that as long as you can, right? So if you point down, you're going to lose it too fast. And if you point up, you're going to slow down. So it's called maximum glide path. So whatever your plane is, you learn that number. Okay, so you set the speed for that. Now you have the most time you're ever going to have. You're never going to have more. You're always going to have less. Now you look around for the golf course or the field or the football stadium or whatever it might be, or the Hudson River, like that guy.
Like that guy, yeah.
Yeah, and he saved all the people because he didn't panic. So, you learn those things. That makes you a better engineer in a certain way. If Whitney Houston is singing and the mic catches fire, you don't scream and start tearing your hair out. You go get a new mic and you walk out. I'm sorry, Miss Houston. I hope you didn't burn your hair. Here's a new mic.
Has that really happened, by the way?
No, I'm being silly. But you know what I mean. So an artist like a Whitney Houston, you don't want anything to mess up while she's doing a take. Right?
You recorded her, not only mixed, right? You recorded her as well, right?
Yeah, I recorded her, yes, on her mother's album, yeah.
Mm.
And, you want to have everything perfect. You have picked out the best mic in the house and then everything is set. And, you don't want to say, oh, well, can we do that again? It went in the red. That would be deadly for your career. So you get prepared. But my point was that the piloting, learning how to be cool under pressure, translated very well to engineering.
Sure.
Just whatever the wings are on fire, no problem. We're going to land.
Yeah.
Okay. And in a big band session, that might be the case, like, oh, okay. We didn't get the trombones on that last take. Okay, no problem. We'll overdub, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I'm being a little silly now. We've been talking for a long time, but you get the point.
No, I totally get the point. It must have been an amazing practice for you.
But see, this kind of silliness also is part of my vibe in my house here, in my clubhouse. Mm-hmm. Of like, it's okay to be silly about music. Music is sometimes very silly.
Totally.
Right? And when you listen to those Beatles outtakes, they're laughing all the time. They're just cracking up all the time. And then they play something great.
I mean, after all, we are floating on a piece of rock in the empty space and talking about music here. It's so beautiful.
Right. And we all are going to come and go at some point. We have, like, say, a maximum glide slope for altitude. We have maximum heartbeats. Mm-hmm. So what are you going to do with yours? You're going to be grouchy or insecure? I don't know if my symphony's ready to put out, I got to work on the second movement a little more. Okay, well, work on the second movement, but why don't you put out your first symphony and then write your second symphony? Johannes Brahms, who famously didn't put out a symphony till he was quite old, but still, he did have a body of work at the end of the day.
Dave, I really appreciate your time. I know you're so giving with it, but I want to close it up. So what would be your advice to aspiring music professionals looking to follow a versatile career like yours? What is your advice?
I think these things will go for any creative, whether you're in the visual arts or cinema or whatever. First of all, take everything that comes your way, even if you don't think you're going to like it, because you might learn something from it, right? That's how I got in hip-hop gigs and dance gigs and everything, even though I wasn't a hip-hop guy. But can you do it? Yeah, I can do it.
That's it.
And then, be reliable and prepared and early and everything. Don't be one of those, oh, sorry, the train wasn't running and then, don't be that guy. Ron Carter says, if you're not 20 minutes early, you're 30 minutes late. Like he's got a lot of jokes like that, but he's right. He was the guy that kept the Miles Quintet on point. He was the adult in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's going to oversleep once in their career.
Sure.
The alarm's not going to wake you up or you forget to set it. But in general, be reliable and be prepared and take everything that comes your way. And whatever you learn from that day goes into your bag of tricks that you didn't know before you went to that gig.
Sure.
You're going to learn something every day. There's something that's going to happen that's going to contribute to your bag of tools.
Good.
So, it's not easy. I know it's not easy because everybody can do it. So that makes it very vox populi. There's like so many people making beats and everything, but good is good, right? If you work hard and become good, you'll be heard. I believe that, even in the world of Spotify. I think. So, good is good. Yeah, just do good music or make good cinema or make great oil paintings, whatever it is that you've decided to do.
I love that.
And if you're an oil painter and somebody says, I want a mural in my bedroom and it's got to be my 3 kids, you go, okay, I could do that.
Good.
You don't start as Picasso. None of us start none of us start out as Quincy Jones. Quincy Jones didn't start out as Quincy Jones, right? He had hit the streets and hustled. Miles didn't start out as Miles. He hustled. All of us, that's the path.
Miles' autobiography that was gifted to me, and it was in my bookshelf. It was like there for years, like decades.
Yeah.
I finally this year I picked it up one morning, and it went like, oh my God, man,
Fire, right?
Ride, what a ride! How amazing!
What a ride!
I immediately gifted that to Spiro afterwards. I'm like, you have to.
Oh, great! No, it's inspiring. Although Billy Strayhorn, the autobiography is great. Herbie's biography, Possibilities, is great. Ron's Finding the Right Notes is great.
Yeah.
Ron Carter was a classical cellist up against racism. They told him you're never going to play in an orchestra because you're black. And so he went, okay, so I want a gig. Who's needed more than anything? Okay, bass. Well, I'm already a cello player, so I could probably play bass. And I have some training. He went to Eastman. And he tells that story very forthrightly of like he was pissed, but he did something about it and became the most recorded bass player in the history of the world and plays on everything from bossa novas to Miles Davis, swing tunes, and wrote songs for that period of Miles Davis. So, you take adversity and you turn it into your favor, by sheer force of will. He's very inspiring in that respect. And he's mid-80s, 86, and playing like he's a teenager. He plays amazingly well.
Well, quite recently, like last year, I saw on your Facebook photos, you had him in the studio, right?
He's been here, a number of times. I'm actually in the movie that just came out with him.
Oh yeah.
They filmed some of the movie here, so you see me in it, and he's always so kind and general. We always have a big hug, and it's like, "How you doing, Ron? I'm doing better now that I saw you, man." That's how he answers you. Yeah, if you're in his camp, he's very loyal and very supportive.
Mm-hmm.
So he asked the filmmakers to come here. He said, I have a gig coming up in my friend's studio, and it's small, but you guys can set up. And because they needed to, get the last bit of footage to finish it, it was interrupted by a pandemic, and this was after, like, post-pandemic. And so we got a lot of airtime. There's probably 15 minutes of bass hit in the Ron Carter documentary.
I gotta see that.
Pretty cool.
So cool. The last question of the day.
Okay.
If you were granted a magic wand to create the ultimate working environment, I mean, I know you already live in your ultimate, but let's say even most ultimate.
Yeah.
What would be your moonshot vision, the artist who, when you imagine collaborating with, makes you think, oh man, absolutely love to work with them? This could be anyone, by the way, dead or alive.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've already told you I worked with all the Miles quintet, second grade quintet, so that's checked. Sting was kind of on the list, and that's checked. And the only one that's on my real list that's still alive and probably not doing too much recording anymore is Paul McCartney.
Oh,
but I think I would be in so much. I'd be like in such awe. It would be hard. I think I wasn't in awe of Sting. I wasn't in awe of Wayne. I mean, I loved them, and I wasn't in awe of Ron. I just wanted to please them, all of them. But I wasn't like, a fan, like a teenage girl. But I think with McCartney is just, to me, so gifted. He can play anything. He can sing anything. He can rock out like Little Richard, and then he can play a silly dance hall song like Your Mother Should Know or something. He covers a big spectrum. Well, all the contemporary jazz guys have pretty much come through here at some point. Wynton Marsalis. I do a lot of Tom Harrell. People that I really, really, really respect and think are great writers and players. I'm kind of covered in that. I don't really do young people's pop. It's very political, that sort of Beyonce, Rihanna stuff. I'm not really that kind of a person.
Mm-hmm.
Although I have done back in the day, Mariah and Whitney and people like that. But it's super record company politics and things like that. I'm in a point in my career where I like relaxing more. But, I get to work with Janice Siegel from Manhattan Transfer, like phenomenal singer. Melba Moore comes here quite often. And, I've been lucky to record some really, really great singers in my lifetime. Jocelyn Brown and Lolita Holloway and unbelievable Patti LaBelle. So really McCartney is the only guy on my... Paul, if you're listening, Sir Paul, I know you live in the Hamptons. If you feel like throwing down a demo and you're eating pizza in Manhattan, I'm your boy.
I think he has a place in Upper East Side too, still. So it's close by.
I'm sure he has a few places around. But I also know that he doesn't like the fanboy thing. Like if you come on to him and go, "Oh man, it's so great to meet you, Paul McCartney," that's a turnoff, right? As you can imagine, he spent his entire adult life with that kind of like people at him all the time. I've heard, I don't know, but I've heard if you just chill and, facilitate, he's worked with 1 million engineers, right? He's had a whole cast of characters of engineers and guitar player collaborators. You don't have to show him anything. He can sense right away if you know what you're doing or you don't know what you're doing and if you're cool to hang out with. So I would have to be really on my toes to be cool, like stay cool.
I guess I never told you about it. So one Labor Day, I'm coming back from a wedding gig. I'm sharply dressed. I have my guitar.
Yeah.
And on the way, my friends are living on that street. I'm about to go say hi to them. I'm just finished with my gig.
Uh-huh.
And I saw this person coming towards me out there. I'm like, no way. And then I still wouldn't have made out that it would be him, but I kept seeing his big divorce and this new Hamptons lady that he had been with. So I recognized her. I'm like, oh my God, it's Paul McCartney. And I'm just in awe. And he goes, is that a guitar? I'm like, it's so good to see you. I couldn't say anything else but that. And she made fun of me. She's like, well, it took you long enough to figure out. I couldn't say anything. I just couldn't talk.
See, that's what my fear, I don't want that to happen if I get the chance to say hello. There's a famous video of, Will Lee has the Fab Four band. What that is? It's like a tribute band. You know who Will Lee is, the bass player? Mm-hmm. So they have the band called the Fab Four. They're an amazing band. They do the albums exactly note for note. And so at one of those things, maybe it was like the concert for George or something where it was a lot of stars and Will was the bass player. And he's talking to Paul about the Fab Four. Yeah, we got this band, the Fab Four. We do all your albums, man. And Paul is like, look, he's looking around for somebody else to talk to. And Will Lee's not a slouch. He's a famous guy and an amazing bass player. But he doesn't want to hear about your fandom, and I can appreciate that. I think Ron is the same way too. When I first time I worked with Ron, I didn't say, man, you're the reason I do this. Like I've been listening to your records since I'm, this high. I didn't do that. We just worked for a long time. And then he'd talk, why do you call it bass hit? Oh, I was a bass player. I was legitimately trained like you were. And I said that I knew he went to Eastman and said, oh, well, what kind of bass do you play? Turns out we played the same bass, Ron and I, Juzek, which was like a K guitar, very common in the teens and 20s.
Wow.
So his is 1910 and mine's 1913. So we have 110-year-old basses of the same maker. So he goes, what are you doing on Friday? I said, I get off at 7. He said, well, I got a set at 7:30 at the Blue Note. Can you come down right away? And I'll meet you at the bar. I thought, that's odd. What does he want me to come down for? Maybe he's going to give me a CD or something. He had just changed his pickup on his Juzek bass and got a new one. And he put the old one in a box and presented it to me. So my bass has Ron Carter's original pickup on it right now.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't because he was trying to get anything from me or all that. It's just like we vibed on being legitimate bass players together, even though I don't play that much anymore. But I have done, and I was kind of successful at it. And so he could see that. And there are pictures to prove it. And he goes, yeah, come down and meet me at the Blue Note. Here, I want you to have this, man. Like, oh, Ron, thanks, man. I'm going to put it on tomorrow. He goes, yeah, you'll enjoy it. And he was telling me about it. It's got a knob, so you can turn up or down without reaching back to your amp. And he got into it. It's like I'm in his band. We're bandmates. You know what I mean? Hey, man, I got this new pickup, and look what it does. How many of those conversations have we all had with our bandmates? Millions, right?
Wow, what a gift. Well, what a gift you are, Dave. Thank you so much.
You too, bro. It's been really great, and I can't wait to your next song to appear.
I'm
The
getting there.
sooner the better, as far as I'm concerned.